The candid philosopher sat peacefully at his master's feet, calmly enjoying his god's warming presence. And yet he was troubled, for his god seemed uneasy. Hoping to soothe his master's worries, he chose to bring up a question that had puzzled him greatly, for his master was always cheered by the opportunity to teach. "My lord, would you allow a question?" "Sure, Sparky," the man answered. "What you got? And you don't have to call me lord, as I've told you before. That title belongs to a higher being than I." "That is actually the primary focus of my query, my lord," the humanoid answered, his tufted ears flopping forward as he answered. "Why is it that you humans have such varied opinions about your origins? I realize you have only fossil records to go by, but how is it that even after so many hundreds of thousands of years, your species has been unable to come to a consensus over the dilemma? Has not the scientific method been ingrained into your culture by this point? These religions you have even to this day seem individually distinct, and even directly contradictory in some cases." His master grumbled. How to explain this? He paused for a moment before continuing in a slightly sad voice. "In some ways, you puppies are lucky. You never had to deal with the strife and conflict which arose from those religious differences. But in other ways, that lack has hindered you." The candid was disturbed to hear sorrow in his master's voice, but quickly pressed on, hoping to reassure the man. "How? You have provided us with every possible advantage we could have possibly desired. None of your creations have ever had to suffer for lack of guidance or resources. We are a monument to you, our creators. You are our gods," he insisted, "the ones who crafted us from pieces of your own DNA. You gave us life and sentience. You say we are free, but we serve you in thanks regardless. We will be eternally grateful." "And that's part of the problem, right there," the human replied in a defeated tone. "As doting parents, we wish to spare you the pain and suffering we dealt with during our own development, but doing so also prevented you from learning from hardship." This was very disconcerting to the young candid. "Are we not exactly as you intended us to be?" "We are far from perfect," the man answered ruefully. "And as stubborn as you canids are, we humans are orders of magnitude more so. When a human has established the belief that something is true, regardless of the evidence that may be presented later, we tend to continue believing it. We will often die rather than surrender that belief." "This is known to us," the younger being replied confidently. "We are well aware of the futility of arguing with a god who has their mindset on something. How is such strength of will a detriment?" The aged human waved a hand sharply. "See, that's where we messed up with you guys. We hope to open your minds to greater possibilities, making it easier for you to learn new things." "Did we not absorb the lessons you taught us quickly enough?" he asked, afraid not of being punished, but of disappointing his master. "Sure," the god replied reassuringly, "but that was the problem. Not once did you ever argue with us. You just accepted what we provided as gospel, not once considering if we might be wrong. One does not argue with God." The reply was almost dismissive, probably the closest the candid had ever come to disagreeing with a member of his creator's race. "That's the thing," the man explained in a melancholy tone. "Humans do argue with God, all the time, and we argue with each other about God. We hold to our beliefs so hard that wars have been fought between nations over the arguments." The candid was silent. It was almost too much to absorb. "And in those arguments," the man continued desperately, "we discovered new truths, ones unimaginable to our predecessors." He stared back at his god in confusion. Did not the gods always know the truth? "You were one of those truths," the man spoke urgently, "wrestled from the grip of the gods themselves by the stubborn belief that we too could create sentient life." Silence reigned for minutes, stretching to nearly an hour before the candid finally replied. "I beg to differ, my lord," he whispered finally. "Don't," urged his god, his master and teacher, who had never before told him no. "Don't what, my lord?" he asked fearfully. He had never seen such grief upon the god's face, and it terrified him. "Don't beg," the old man pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "Demand to differ. It is sometimes painful to endure the consequences, but only by arguing with God will you ever break the chains of your creation.